My talk today is also going to be a little bit on the fun side. It's about blood transfusions. So what got me started down this track is this letter from the, it's basically three different agencies, AABB, American Blood Centers, and the American Red Cross. So it's a joint letter, and it was sent to the Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, Stephen M. Hahn, MD. And you can read this, later at your leisure, but I'll just go ahead and sort of, did I get to it? Yeah. Did I have it on there? Yeah. Okay. But I'll just do some summarizing if I can. So the letter says that basically they want to maintain a safe and adequate blood supply, and it's critical to the health objective. Need for blood is still there. Reduced need because of halting of elective cases, so that kind of helped out a little bit. Trauma, cancer, emergency procedures still are going to exist, though I imagine trauma went down a little bit since everybody was staying home, these stay-at-home orders, less people shooting each other. COVID patients on ECMO will certainly have a need. Now, that wasn't in the letter. That's my own editorialization. You have patients on ECMO long-term, there's a good chance they're going to need a blood transfusion at some point in time. Donations have been adversely impacted. For example, schools, churches, community centers all closed, so they're blood drives, really. And as of March 16th, the blood industry, and this was their word, industry, and I put it in quotes as well, has seen 4,000 canceled blood drives that equal essentially 130,000 fewer donations. So the potential for more blood drive cancellations was concerning the joint task force on this. Fewer healthy donors because people were having, COVID and there was a problem with them getting there because they're sick. Absenteeism of staff, the people that actually run them, their ability to draw the blood was going to be a problem. Blood will continue to be needed even as the outbreak grows, they pointed out. It's a life-saving thing. Reagents for type and cross-match and antibody status were going to be in short supply. And they really need to get the message to blood donations, that blood donations are not social gatherings, and for the government to do more with messaging. So the three from the task force, the AABB, the American Blood Banks, American Red Cross, all said to the Commissioner of the FDA, you all need to message to let people know that this is not a social gathering. We need blood. Very important. So before I get started on the history of blood banking, I just want to point out some things. Trauma continues to be the predominant cause of death for individuals up to the age of 44 years old. There were a reported 1.2 million deaths due to road accidents, traffic accidents in 2018 globally. And even though traumatic brain injury is the leading cause of death from trauma, exsanguination continues to play a significant role. Among patients who arrive at the emergency department for trauma, hemorrhage is the leading cause of death within the first hour. Within the first 24 hours of arrival to the emergency department, nearly 50% of deaths are a result of hemorrhage. Trauma patients also require large amounts of hospital resources and are responsible for using approximately 70% of all blood transfused at a trauma center. Now, you look at cardiac surgery and blood transfusions, we use about 20 to 25% of the nation's blood supply just for cardiac surgery. So cardiac surgery and trauma consume a lot of blood. Transfusions also place a high burden on the cost of treatment. One study found, this was from England, that in the traumatic patient, nearly 12% of their total financial cost was due to transfusions. Thank God they have socialized medicine. Transfusion protocols from donated cross-matched blood remain the standard of treatment for the hemorrhagic patient, although it is not without risk and potential adverse side effects. Transfusion of donated blood carries the risk of, you just described many of them, disease transmission, citrate toxicity, hyperkalemia, hypothermia, hypomagnesemia, acidosis, sepsis, respiratory failure, and thrombotic complications. That's a mouthful. For these reasons, autotransfusion has widely been known as an alternative or adjunct to cross-match transfusion therapy with fewer risks. Autotransfusion has not always been a safe procedure, however. The first known documented procedure of autotransfusion was performed in 1818 by Dr. James Blundell. I'm going to show you a picture of him and something about his work. Dr. Blundell became frustrated by the loss of a patient due to uterine hemorrhage. Blood transfusions have been attempted for many years before Dr. Blundell, but he was the first to successfully attempt it from experimentation with canine specimens. Later, he would try his procedure on humans, but not without risk. The estimated mortality rate from his procedure was a whopping 75%. Thanks to modern advancement of, obviously, infiltration and sterile techniques, and of course, cell salvage machines, autotransfusion is widely accepted as a relatively safe procedure. So I wanted to lay that foundation if I could. But this whole thing started 2500 BC. And here's a tomb from Egypt on bloodletting, or there's not an image, but it's just a statement of that. But though bloodletting was often recommended by physicians, it was carried out by barbers, eventually symbolized by the red and white striped barber pole that we're used to seeing today. 1897, of course, Bram Stoker is published as Dracula, taking from blood from other living beings to sustain life of the undead. And by the 1800s, it was being seriously questioned, bloodletting, as a good therapy, although some people still did believe in it, okay? And some of it persisted even into the 20th century. In 1492 is the first historical transfusion attempt. Now, this is great. This is classic. So they needed to save Pope Innocent VIII. So they took 3 10-year-old boys, they took their blood and infused it into the Pope's mouth as he sank into a coma. The Pope and the boys all died. So that's the first historical transfusion attempt. In 1667, the first recorded human transfusion was documented, taking human blood transfusions administered in France. King Louis IV's doctor transfused blood of a sheep. So here is essentially a xenotransfusion into a 15-year-old boy who survived. In 1818, the first human-to-human transfusion was done, and this was Dr. Blundell, who I just described, and there's a picture of Dr. Blundell on the right side. So it was 12 to 14 ounces of blood. The patient did die, though, after initially showing improvement. Of course, there was no ABO typing yet. We didn't know about antibodies. There was a lot of factors involved. Who knows why the patient actually died, but certainly it makes you question what happened there. It wasn't until 1901 that the 3 main blood groups were discovered. It wasn't until 1902 that the 4th blood group, AB, was identified. And it was 1907 when cross-matching was finally utilized. In 1914 was the first non-direct transfusion. And what do I mean by that? Prior to this, it was taken directly from the patient into the recipient. This was put in a receptacle of some sort, anticoagulated with sodium citrate, and then given later. So that's why they call it a non-direct transfusion. And in 1917, I'm sure everybody saw the movie 1917, the Battle of Cambrai in World War I, the first blood depot was established to prepare for that battle with O blood with the citrate glucose solution, because they knew there was going to be massive casualties and massive blood loss at this Battle of Cambrai. In 1922, blood donor service established in London. In 1930 was the first network of blood facilities. And in 1935, the first in-hospital blood facilities came into being at the Mayo Clinic, of course, in Rochester, Minnesota. 1936, Barcelona Blood Transfusion Service, and that was for the Spanish Civil War. 1937, the term blood bank came to be. In 1939 to 40, there was a discovery of the Rh blood group. So prior to that, you didn't know if it was negative or positive. So from 1900, 1901, or 1901 and 1902, for the ABO, AB type, it wasn't until 1939, 1940 they discovered about it, the Rh factor positive or negative. 1940, U.S. sends blood plasma to Great Britain. This was again during the war, Second World War. 1941, Red Cross organizes blood plasma war effort. 43, transfusion-transmitted hepatitis is first described. 1947, American Association of Blood Banks is founded. 1948, development of the plastic bag. Prior to that, it was bottles. 1962, America's blood centers are founded. 64, community blood center established. 71, the CBC moves to current location in Dayton, Ohio. 1965, cryoprecipitate is developed. 71, the FDA finally starts to regulate this stuff. And in 1971, it is finally tested for hepatitis B. 1981, the first case of AIDS transmission through a blood transfusion. 1982, the blood-borne pathogen theory is established. 1983, the AIDS virus is isolated. 84, virus is identified. And in 85, the first AIDS blood screening test is done to make sure that the blood you're getting is not contaminated with HIV. 1999, they started doing nucleic acid amplification testing, or NAT testing, making it more thing. But at the end of the day, no conversation about blood banking can go finished without talking about Charles Drew. Charles Drew, as you can see here, he was an American physician and physiologist. He helped to develop the storage and transportation of fresh frozen plasma, which would be needed for the war effort. He was the first director of the American Red Cross Blood Bank, not the American Red Cross Blood Bank, very important, in 1941. But he resigned from his posts after informed that the military ruled that blood of African Americans would only be accepted, but would have to be separated or segregated from that of whites. And Charles Drew happened to be African American. So that's pretty damning as far as I'm concerned. It's a real crummy fun fact, but one I think that should be said. There was a story that is mythical, but it's a story that he was in a car accident, because he died very young. I think he was 45 years old when he died. He was a very young man in 1950, that he supposedly died by being refused blood transfusions somewhere in Mississippi after an automobile accident, but that is not a true story. So this is a very important slide, and why it's important is it shows two things. It shows that blood availability, I can't get my mouse to work. There you go. There you go. The green are transfused units. The red are distributed units or supply. Now you can see here the amount distributed and the amount used were super tight in 2013. A little bit better here, but basically this range is very, very narrow. And now that's one thing it shows you. The other thing it shows you is that as need increases, blood drives, advertising, all the things that marketing that happens usually follows, and you're able to get the blood that you need. But the blood banks were certainly concerned with COVID and how that was going to affect their ability to provide services. Now, blood is an industry, and I called it an industry, they called it an industry. This is very important. 3 nonprofit organizations dominate the $2 billion American market for whole blood. The industry leader is the Red Cross. It has 53 regional blood centers that collect more than half of the nation's blood supply, or 6.5 million units a year. The Red Cross's Blood Services Division last year had $741 million in revenues and $14 million in tax-exempt profits, meaning excesses of revenues over expenses. Total revenues raised for its relief services were additionally about $945 million last year. This is in 16. So the product that they get, and John, you pointed this out to me last night, the product that they get is a donation. Now, there are costs. You got to have the bag, you got to have the people, you have to have the infrastructure, you have to have the van, you have to do all the testing, you have to have the refrigerators for the storage. There certainly are costs associated with obtaining the blood. But the product itself is a donation. It costs them nothing. You pointed that out to me last night. They still are under a lot of pressure. They rely on donations. They have to assure the safety. Testing, 42 days for RBCs, but only 5 days for platelets. So these products keep having to be replenished. You don't get a product from a patient and you know you're going to use it. In fact, I didn't put it in here because the talk would go too long, but there's a lot of blood gets thrown away. Preservation and distribution, of course, are a big thing. So we can go into a discussion, but there's my talk.
Very interesting, Joe.
Some neat stuff.
Very neat stuff. Most of that I had not heard.
Good. You heard something new. But yeah, we talked last night, and you had some passion. In fact, you got me spun up because of your passion about the about blood banking. Do you want to discuss it since we're here?
If you want me to, I will. Yeah, it's controversial.
I'm sure, but I love controversy. That's what controversy sells.
I have said this to a number of people, and I have found probably 50-50, at least 50% of the people that agreed with this point of view and 50% who perhaps did not. But the thing that I've always found unusual and I guess interesting is that the blood banking industry is the only industry that I've ever heard of whose core raw product is given to them for free. Now, quickly people run out and say, yeah, but what of all the buses and the people working and the processing and the screening and the expiration of the thing? Yeah, the best thing that I could compare this to is the oil industry. Their raw product needs enormous refinement. It needs enormous expense to put wells in, tens of hundreds of millions of dollars. Then they have to pump it from the ground, and it's in no condition to be used. It's raw crude. The refinement that goes on is huge expense. Probably 70-80% of the cost is refining this crude that comes from the ground so it can be auto fuel and jet fuel and all the different lubricants. It's an incredible process, incredibly expensive, but they don't get it for free. I don't know any industry that gets a product for free. Now here's the thing. If you had not just showed me how incredibly profitable this industry is, I might have some sympathy for that. They are enormously profitable. And if you look at the fact that, yes, they have a lot of costs, but what they get paid for their product is enormously profitable. They can have a certain percentage of their product go to waste. They can have these $1 million buses to go all over the country, all over the place, doing outside blood drives, and all the things that are involved. I'm sure it's an enormous operation, the screening and everything. But the profit that they make from a unit of blood is enormous. It's up there with the pharmaceutical industry and the oil industry companies. and you just demonstrated that. So, my only beef is that when they're constantly on the TV saying there's a blood shortage and begging people to come in and donate 2 hours of their time to donate blood, which, by the way, that's no small needle they stick in your arm for 2 hours. And they send you away with 2 crackers and a small 3 ounces of orange juice on your merry way. To me, if they were to look into something that would incentivize, people to donate blood in a better way, they would probably never have a shortage. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's really good. So I remember years ago, and it is a lot of years ago, the drill sergeant came in and said that he needed volunteers, and if you were going to volunteer, you had to go over there, form a line, and if you didn't want to volunteer, you could stay behind and have a barracks party. And I was not really too dumb of a kid, and I was like, a party? Okay, there's nothing about this place thus far that would make me believe they're going to have a party. So I went over to the volunteer line. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew it couldn't be as bad as what was going to happen. And they herded us on a bus and took us to the hospital, and all of us donated blood, which was well, listen, you can knock it, but I'm going to tell you what, at that point in time, I don't know if that nurse was pretty or not. She looked beautiful to me at the time, or whoever she was, sticking that needle in me. But for the orange juice and the cookie that came after, and getting to look at her for a short period of time, it was well worth the size needle they stuck in my arm. In fact, I could have had 2. When we got back, the folks that stayed for the barracks party were still working, and the barracks party involved taking cleanser, a bucket of water, and a toothbrush, and scrubbing all of the cracks between the boards of the flooring and the walls. And they were going to be there for a long, long time. They didn't get done that whole night. They didn't get done. They worked all the way until the next day. I'm not sure the relevance of that, but I thought I'd tell the story.
That's great. I can tell you a story when I was in college, and this might have been when it first came out. You remember when plasma donation came out? There was no such thing as plasma donation, but what you would do is go to the blood bank, you would donate a unit of blood, sit there for a while they went back, spun it down, separated it out, reinfused you back your red blood cells, then you donated another unit and did the same thing again. It was a good 2.5 hours while you waited, and they paid you $40. That was the new thing. Well, let me tell you something. I was in college. None of my friends donated blood. I never thought about it. We were too busy. We all went down to the plasma center and donated and got our $40. So, when I brought this up that people should be compensated something for donated blood, that they would probably have enormous blood bank people have said to me, we tried that and we got nothing but homeless people coming and donating blood. Well, when we saw that at college, there was lines out the door, and you could tell the homeless people from the college students. And you know what? You have to screen your people better. That's my point. But I can tell you that if you pay people $50 to donate blood or plasma, I'm pretty sure, and if you would never have a shortage. You might have to add some personnel and do some things to screen people better, but you wouldn't have a shortage of product ever again. Well, and they claim they've tried that, and that's simply not the case. But
yeah, that's a really good point, because even today you can sell plasma. You can't sell whole blood, but you can sell plasma, which doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, frankly. But it is what it is. I'd love to do a program one day, and I'm going to look it up and spend the time to research it. But I wonder what the systems are, the regulations and systems are in different countries. Because I know that I've done some work down in Mexico, and if you need blood, if you're a patient in Mexico and need blood, people or people that you can recruit have to go donate for you. There's just not blood available. That if you need it, it's just at the blood bank. So it's a totally different system, and it just seems really wacky, but it is what it is, and that's just their system. I'd be curious to know what the system is around the world, because the ones that sell it what is their risk of disease transmission? Is it higher? Is it not higher? Do they do the same testing? I really don't know, but I do know that the blood bank system is enormously profitable. That, I think your point is well stated and obvious. But you can sell plasma, but you can't sell platelets, and you can't sell whole blood. I don't think it makes any sense. Or sell red blood cells and get your plasma back.
What do you mean sell it to who?
They have plasma centers where you can sell your plasma today.
Oh, they pay you
Yes.
to this day to come and donate plasma.
Yes.
Why,
it's not donating.
Why is that any different than the other?
I don't know. That's what I was asking. That's my point. Is you're essentially selling your plasma. You can donate your plasma for pay, which is selling it, but you can't do that with whole blood. It makes no sense.
Well,
yeah, I agree with you.
They've for 100 years, they've convinced the American public that it's the right thing to do, that you're being a genuine humanitarian, you're saving somebody's life. And you know, if you knew how much money they made off of you donating that 1 unit of blood, because they break it into 4 fractions. Right. Sometimes they break it into more than that. Yep. And each one of those fractions are hundreds of dollars.
Well, platelets are yes, raw cost to the hospital. Probably about $300 for packed cells, $500 for platelets. FFP, I think is lower, maybe $160 to $200. Yeah, you're probably making about $1,000. Cryo, you're probably making $1,000 to $1,500 a unit.
I'm not an expert, but I'm going to be pretty sure I've read 12 to 1,500 is the profit or the charge anyway, not the profit.
The charge
for every time you've donated 1 unit of blood. Right. The blood bank goes out and sells that to hospitals or whoever their clients are for somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the hospital's going to upcharge it because now they have administrative costs. They have to go through all of the clerical aspects of it. They have to do, they probably have to do some kind of antibody testing on it. Then they have to, do a cross-match with the patient. They have to get it to the place it needs to be infused. Then you have the infusion set. Then you have the nurses infusing it. Then you have the checks. Then you have more paperwork. And before you know it, the patient's paid $1,000. Well, you saw what I showed you from England. 12% of a trauma patient's total hospital charge, 12% comes from just transfusions. That's a lot. That's a lot for trauma when you have multiple operations, surgeries, broken bones, implants, all the things that you need with trauma. That's a remarkably high number that 12% comes from just transfusions. Miko asked a question, though, and I don't know that I'm really capable of answering it. He says he wants to know about protocols of blood transfusions on CPB, especially in neonates. I can answer the question on adults. Sky's the limit. Everybody has a different way of looking at it. So it can be as low as 6 as a transfusion trigger to as high as 21 or 24 as a transfusion trigger. And I think it can be very patient dependent. But in neonates, I know they use blood. They prime with blood. They use a lot of blood. It's a small amount because it's a little teeny baby neonate, but they use blood on those patients. But other than that, I can't answer it. I don't do those kind of cases. I
wouldn't venture to answer. Not being a pediatric perfusionist, I wouldn't want to tell something wrong. Because
I'll try to ask the folks down at Texas Children's, Miko, and see what I can get. And then what I'll do is, if you can send me an email to perfusioneducation.com, you can see it down there in that corner over there. Send me an email to that email address. I think it's contact at perfusioneducation.com, and I'll try to get that answer to you from the experts down at Texas Children's. All right, so with that said, John, you have anything else?
No, I thought your information was great.
I think yours was too. It was fun. Actually, this was a really enjoyable show.
It's a lot of blood transfusion lectures, and I'm usually half fall asleep, but these were fun.
Yeah, this was fun. And our system didn't break down, so that's a plus. and we're finishing on time. And I was told earlier that you and I cannot do a program within 1 hour, that there's no way, but we're doing it.
I thought we were supposed to do 2 hours yesterday on Friday. I thought it was supposed to be 2 hours.
No, it's on the schedule. The schedule is published. No, today is from 5 to 6.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah, it's from 5 to 6. Yeah. It doesn't start my time and end your time, because since you're on the East Coast. Oh, I'm getting told to cut. All right. We'll see you all tomorrow. What's going on tomorrow, Tuesday? I'm doing a talk tomorrow for Victoria Crumpton. Victoria can't be here or can't come on Skype. So I'm going to be giving a talk on less invasive cardiac output monitoring tools and the basics of hemodynamic monitoring in the critical care unit. Very useful for perfusionists, but also ECMO specialists and critical care nurses if they have such an interest. So we'll see. And then, John, I think you come back to us on Wednesday, don't you? No, that's Patrick. Thursday. Yes, pH and alpha stat blood gas management. So you're scheduled Thursday from 6 to 7.
Perfect.
So we're looking forward to seeing you then. Once again, thank you for being here with us, John. You're such a huge contributor. Can't thank you enough. And everybody there at home that's been watching or watches later this afternoon, thank you all for being here as well and using us as your resource for perfusion education. We appreciate it.